The rescue. The cargo freighter Gentle Current drifted through the asteroid field of the 442 system, its hull from countless journeys between the outer colonies. Captain, a tall with deep blue skin and 4 arms, monitored the navigation console while his small crew performed routine maintenance. They were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders, their natural empathy making them excellent negotiators and mediators. "Captain, I'm detecting a distress signal," called out Engineer, her chitinous features clicking with concern. "It's coming from Sector 7 near the mining station ruins." His large, dark eyes narrowed as he studied the readout. "That's strange. No one should be out there. The mining operation was abandoned 3 years ago after the ore veins dried up." The signal was weak, barely distinguishable from background radiation, but unmistakably artificial. Had been trading in these systems for over 2 decades, and he'd learned that ignoring distress calls led to sleepless nights. His people believed that helping others brought good fortune, and abandoning someone in need invited cosmic retribution. "Set course for the signal source," he ordered, "and prepare the medical bay just in case." The Gentle Current changed course, its ion drives pushing through the debris field with practiced ease. As they approached the coordinates, the ship's sensors began painting a clearer picture. There, tumbling slowly among the asteroids, was a small escape pod of unfamiliar design. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered, her compound eyes reflecting the console's blue light. "The materials are primitive, but the design is elegant. Look at those heat dispersal patterns." Studied the pod's configuration. It was roughly cylindrical, about 3 meters long, with what appeared to be improvised modifications welded to its hull. Scorch marks and impact dents told a story of recent violence. "Life signs?" he asked. "Faint but present. Single occupant, unknown species. The life support systems are failing. Captain, we have maybe an hour before whoever's in there suffocates." Without hesitation, activated the ship's tractor beam. The escape pod was carefully drawn into the cargo bay, where automated systems immediately began analyzing its atmosphere and composition. The results were puzzling. The atmosphere is nitrogen-oxygen-based, similar to several known species, but the pressure ratios are unique, reported MedTech, a graceful ethereal whose translucent features glowed softly in the bay's lighting. "I'm detecting elevated stress hormones and signs of recent trauma." As the cargo bay pressurized to match the pod's atmosphere, and his crew gathered around the small craft, the access hatch was sealed, but its engineering skills made short work of the locking mechanism. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the hatch swung open. Inside lay a creature unlike anything they had encountered in their travels. It was bipedal, roughly their height, with pink-tan skin and strange fur covering its head. Most striking were its eyes, small compared to standards, but intense and intelligent. The being was conscious but clearly weak, wearing what appeared to be a modified environmental suit. "Easy," said softly, raising his 4 hands in a peaceful gesture. "We're here to help." The creature's eyes widened, and it spoke in a language none of them recognized. The words were sharp and quick, full of consonants that clicked and hissed. But the universal translator, while struggling with the unfamiliar syntax, began picking up emotional context, gratitude, relief, and underlying determination. "I think it's saying thank you," observed, her empathic abilities allowing her to sense the being's emotional state. "There's also fear, but not of us. Fear of something else, something that pursued it here." They carefully extracted the stranger from the pod, running medical scans as they transferred it to the ship's medical bay. The creature was malnourished and dehydrated, with several healing wounds that suggested recent combat. But what caught their attention was its equipment, primitive by galactic standards, but ingeniously modified. "Look at this," marveled, examining a device that appeared to be some sort of communication array. "They've somehow managed to boost the signal strength by 300% using what looks like scavenged components. The mathematical principles are sound, but the execution is creative." Over the following days, as their patient recovered, they learned remarkable things. The creature called itself human, and through the gradually improving translation matrix, they discovered its name was. It was an explorer from a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Explained, through gestures and slowly translated words, that his research vessel had been attacked by raiders while investigating ancient ruins on a dead world. The attackers had been a notorious pirate clan that preyed on isolated ships and colonies. His crew had been killed, but he'd managed to escape in the pod just before the ship's reactor went critical. The Mused, we know of them. They've been getting bolder lately, attacking trading vessels in the outer systems, but why target a single research ship? Showed them data he'd managed to save from his ship's computers. The ruins he'd been studying contained references to something the translation software called the Old Network Ancient Alien Technology of Immense Power. They had obviously wanted this information for themselves. As grew stronger, the crew of the Gentle Current found themselves fascinated by this resilient human. Despite losing his entire team and nearly dying himself, showed no signs of giving up. Instead, he spent his time learning their language, studying their technology, and sharing his own knowledge freely. Your people, asked one evening as they shared a meal in the ship's common area, how do they handle loss? I sense great sadness in you, but also something else. Was quiet for a long moment, staring out the viewport at the stars. We remember, he said finally, his accent still thick but his meaning clear. We remember our dead and we make their deaths mean something. My crew died protecting that information. I won't let their sacrifice be wasted. Exchanged glances with his crew. In their travels, they had encountered hundreds of species, but few showed such determination in the face of overwhelming loss. Most beings, when faced with the destruction had witnessed, would seek only to return home and forget. Where will you go now? Asked. Your ship is gone and you're far from your home space. Pulled up a star chart on his salvaged, pointing to a distant cluster of systems. There's a research station here, station. They'll have the resources to analyze the data I recovered. If I can get this information to them, my crew's death will help protect others from the... The distance was enormous, nearly 300 light-years through dangerous, poorly charted space. For a single human with limited resources, it might as well have been impossible. That's a long journey for one person, said carefully. It is, agreed, but it's what needs to be done. That night, the crew of the Gentle Current held a private conference. They had already deviated significantly from their trade route to rescue this human, and their employers were expecting them at their destination. Taking to station would add weeks to their journey and cost them significant profits. But as looked at his crew, with her logical engineer's mind, with her deep empathy, and the others who made up their small family, he saw the same thought reflected in all their faces. We'll take him, he announced. The cargo can wait. When they told of their decision, the human's reaction surprised them. He didn't show the effusive gratitude they expected. Instead, he simply nodded and said, "Thank you, I won't forget this." There was something in the way he said it, a gravity and certainty that made believe that this was the kind of being who remembered debts and honored them. It was, he thought, a good quality in a friend. The journey to station took 3 weeks, during which proved himself a valuable temporary crew member. He was quick to learn, fearless in the face of danger, and possessed an intuitive understanding of complex systems that impressed even. When they encountered a group of raiders near the relay, it was tactical suggestions that helped them evade the pirates without a fight. Your people, observed as they watched the raider ships disappear on the sensors, they think differently about conflict than most species. Nodded thoughtfully. We've had a lot of practice. Where I come from, peace is something you fight for, not something that just happens. When they finally reached station, gathered his few possessions and prepared to disembark. The research station was a massive structure orbiting a gas giant, its laboratories and living quarters housing scientists from dozens of species. This is where we part ways, said, clasping his primary hands in the human gesture of farewell he'd taught them. I can't repay what you've done for me, not yet, but someday if you ever need help, find a way to contact me or my people. I promise you we don't forget our friends. As the Gentle Current departed station, watched the massive structure dwindle behind them. Do you think we'll ever see him again, Captain? Considered the question. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, the chances of encountering any specific individual again were vanishingly small. Probably not, he admitted. But I have a feeling that isn't the kind of person who disappears quietly. Something tells me we haven't heard the last of the humans. The crew returned to their normal trading routes, but they found themselves watching the news feeds with new interest, looking for any mention of humans or the mysterious species represented. Months passed, then years, but they heard nothing. The galaxy was vast, and humanity remained a footnote in the endless catalog of minor species struggling to find their place among the stars. Occasionally wondered what had become of the determined human they'd rescued. Had he delivered his data successfully? Had his people learned from the information his crew had died to protect? Were they out there somewhere, growing stronger, preparing to take their place in the galactic community? But as time passed and the immediate memory of their encounter faded, became just another story they told in port bars. The tale of the strange, resilient human they'd pulled from a drifting escape pod. It was a good story, the kind that reminded other spacers why they stopped for distress calls and helped strangers in need. Neither nor his crew could have imagined that their simple act of kindness had set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power in their region of the galaxy. They had no way of knowing that it had not just been any human, but a key figure in humanity's emerging military intelligence network. The data he carried hadn't just contained information about ancient ruins. Hidden within those files were detailed scans of ship configurations, tactical analyses of their raiding patterns, and intelligence about their base locations that had gathered during his captivity. Information that would prove invaluable to a species that had just realized it was not alone in a hostile universe. As the gentle current continued its peaceful trading runs through the outer systems, carrying goods and passengers between the scattered colonies, humanity was stirring. They were learning, growing, and preparing. The seeds of what would come next had already been planted in the moment decided to answer a distress call from an unknown species. In the vast darkness between stars, wheels were turning that would bring honor to a simple act of kindness and change the fate of all who dwelled in that corner of the galaxy. The expansion. 7 years had passed since the rescue of, and the galaxy had grown notably darker. The Confederation, once a collection of loosely organized pirate clans, had evolved into something far more dangerous. Their raids had become systematic campaigns of conquest, their fleets growing larger and more aggressive with each passing month. Captain stood on the bridge of the gentle current, now showing his age with silver threads through his blue skin, as he reviewed the latest security briefings from the Galactic Trade Commission. The news was grim. 3 more colonies had gone dark in the past month, all in systems they had been testing with probing attacks. "Captain," called from her station, her voice carrying the tension they all felt these days. "We're receiving a priority message from Port. They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance." Port was a mining colony on the edge of space, home to nearly 50,000 beings from a dozen different species. If they were moving against it, the situation was more serious than anyone had realized. "Set course for port maximum speed," ordered, "and send word to any other merchant vessels in the area. If we're doing an evacuation, we'll need all the cargo space we can get." The gentle current was joined by 7 other trade ships as they approached the port system. What they found there chilled them to their cores. The colony's orbital defense platforms hung dark and lifeless, their weapons arrays torn apart by focused energy fire. In the distance, massive warships patrolled the system's edge like hungry predators. "They're jamming most communications," reported from the sensor station. "But I'm picking up scattered transmissions from the surface. The colony is still holding, but barely." The evacuation was a nightmare of coordination and desperation. Thousands of refugees crowded into cargo holds designed for bulk materials, families clutching their few remaining possessions as they fled the only homes many of them had ever known. They allowed the evacuation to proceed, content to let fear spread to other systems as news of Port's fall reached the trade networks. Among the refugees packed into the gentle current's holds was Dr. who had been studying the planet's unique ecosystem. As the ship fled toward the nearest safe port, found himself in conversation with the elderly scientist. 7 colonies in 6 months, Doctor said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Each one stronger than the last, each one that fell faster than anyone expected. They have changed, Captain. They're not just raiders anymore. They're building something. "Building what?" asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "An empire," the doctor replied, "and we're running out of places to run." The refugee crisis was straining every peaceful species in the sector. The Galactic Trade Commission was overwhelmed, their peacekeeping forces designed for negotiation and escort duties, not military confrontation. The great powers of the galaxy's core systems were too distant and too concerned with their own affairs to intervene in what they saw as a regional problem. It was during this time that strange rumors began circulating through the trade networks. Stories of raiding fleets simply vanishing, their distress calls cut short in the middle of transmission. Tales of mysterious ships with unknown configurations appearing on long-range sensors before disappearing into hyperspace. Most dismissed these stories as wishful thinking or sensor ghosts, but found himself remembering a conversation from years past. Your people think differently about conflict than most species. The words echoed in his memory as he studied reports of the latest movements. The raiders were growing bolder, their attacks more coordinated. Intelligence suggested they were being led by a particularly brutal commander who had turned piracy into an art form. His forces had recently established a major base in the abandoned 442 system, the same asteroid field where they had found escape pod years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. The place where they had performed a simple act of kindness had become the center of a growing darkness. It was who first noticed the pattern in the shipping reports. "Captain, look at this," she said, highlighting entries in the trade database. 17 ships have gone missing in the past 2 months, not destroyed in battle, not captured, just gone. No debris, no survivors, no distress calls. Studied the data, his tactical mind parsing the information. The disappearances weren't random. They formed a pattern, a gradual tightening noose around supply lines and communication routes. Someone was waging a precise, systematic campaign against the raiders, and doing it so efficiently that even this command structure hadn't recognized the threat. "Whoever's doing this," observed, "they know exactly how they operate. Ship positions, patrol routes, communication protocols. This isn't random harassment, this is surgical warfare." The revelation came 3 weeks later, when the Gentle Current was delivering medical supplies to Refuge Station, a hastily constructed facility housing tens of thousands of displaced colonists. Among the crowds of refugees, spotted a familiar face. Dr. Sarah was older than when he'd last seen her, her hair now completely gray, but he recognized the fierce intelligence in her eyes. She had been the head of xenobiology at Station when they delivered 7 years ago. "Doctor," he called out, making his way through the crowded station corridors. "What brings you so far from your research station?" Her expression grew grim. Station was evacuated 6 months ago when they established their base in the system. Most of the research staff relocated to the core worlds, but some of us— She paused, looking around carefully. "Some of us found other ways to continue our work." There was something in her tone, a carefully neutral quality that suggested hidden depths. "Other ways?" prompted. She studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. "Captain, do you remember a human named? You brought him to us several years ago." "Of course. Is he well?" "He's fine, more than fine, actually. The information he brought us about the proved invaluable. It allowed us to understand their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses." She paused again. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you must remain confidential, but I think you deserve to know. Your kindness 7 years ago has had consequences neither of us could have predicted." Doctor led him to a secure conference room where they could speak privately. "After reached us, he didn't just deliver his data and leave. He stayed, worked with our teams, helped us understand what the threat really represented. But more importantly, he sent word back to his people about what was happening out here." "His people listened." "They did more than listen. They acted." She activated a small holographic display showing shipping routes and fleet movements. "For the past 3 years, human ships have been operating throughout this sector. Not openly, they're very careful about that, but they've been watching, learning, preparing." The display showed a complex network of observation posts and hidden facilities, all linked together in a surveillance network that covered thousands of cubic light-years. "They call it the Guardian Network," Doctor continued. "Leads one of their intelligence divisions. He's been coordinating operations against the for over 2 years now." Felt a chill of recognition. The missing ships. Human strike teams. Small, fast, surgical operations designed to degrade capabilities without triggering a larger conflict. They've been very effective. "But why hide it? Why not work openly with the galactic community?" Doctor's expression turned sad. "Because the galactic community has made it clear that they consider this a regional problem. The core worlds won't intervene, and the local governments don't have the resources to fight back effectively. So the humans decided to handle it themselves." She brought up another display, this one showing ship configurations and technical specifications. They've been building, Captain. For 7 years, they've been preparing for a war that everyone else hoped would never come. The information gathered about combined with what they've learned through their own intelligence operations, has allowed them to design ships and weapons specifically optimized for fighting raiders. Studied the technical readouts with growing amazement. Human ship design was unlike anything he'd seen. Angular, aggressive, built for speed and firepower rather than the elegant efficiency preferred by most spacefaring species. These were vessels designed by a people who understood that sometimes violence was the only language that worked. "How many ships do they have?" he asked. "That's classified information I don't have access to," Doctor replied. "But I can tell you that they've established major shipyards in several systems, and they've been recruiting allies among the species that have suffered most from attacks. The hegemony of independent miners has been providing raw materials. The trade syndicate has been sharing intelligence. Even some of the smaller military orders have been cooperating." The picture that emerged was staggering. While the galaxy's established powers had debated and delayed, humanity had quietly assembled a coalition of the willing, united by shared suffering and a common enemy. They had turned this own expansion into a trap, allowing the raiders to grow confident and careless while human intelligence mapped their every move. "When will they act?" asked. "Soon," Doctor said simply. "Very soon. The humans have been waiting for the right moment when they can strike with maximum effect and minimum risk to civilian populations. Or's latest expansion has given them that opportunity." As if summoned by their conversation, an emergency alert klaxon began wailing throughout the station. The public address system crackled to life, and a tense voice announced, "All personnel report to emergency stations. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching the system. Configuration unknown. Estimated arrival in 4 hours." Felt his heart skip a beat. Had they finally decided to attack the refugee centers directly? Were they about to witness the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of innocent beings? Doctor stood calmly, her expression serene. "Captain, I suggest you and your crew prepare to witness something remarkable. The humans are about to announce themselves to the galaxy in a way that will leave no doubt about their intentions." Through the station's viewports, emergency lights began flashing as defensive platforms powered up their weapons. But even as the evacuation alarms sounded and ships prepared to flee, Doctor remained motionless, watching the stars with the patience of someone who knew exactly what was coming. In the distance, space itself seemed to shiver as massive objects dropped out of hyperspace, their approach vectors precise and purposeful. The long wait was over. Humanity had come to settle accounts with those who preyed on the innocent, and they had not come alone. The refugees who had fled aggression across dozens of worlds were about to see their tormentors face an enemy that had studied them, understood them, and prepared specifically to destroy them. An enemy that remembered every act of kindness shown to their people and had the power to return that kindness 1,000-fold. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the human fleet took position, and throughout the station, beings who had lost everything began to hope that perhaps, finally, someone had come to help them reclaim their homes. The reckoning. The first thing Captain noticed about the human fleet was its sheer size. As his instruments struggled to count the vessels emerging from hyperspace, the numbers kept climbing. 50 ships, then 100, then 200. By the time the last destroyer dropped into normal space, the tactical display showed over 350 human vessels arranged in perfect formation. But it wasn't just the numbers that impressed him, it was the precision. Each ship took its designated position with mechanical accuracy, their movements coordinated to a degree that spoke of extensive training and flawless communication. This wasn't a hastily assembled fleet responding to an emergency. This was a military force that had been planning this moment for years. "Captain," whispered from her station, "I'm reading ship classes I've never seen before. Those aren't converted civilian vessels, they're purpose-built warships." The human fleet formed a complex three-dimensional formation that maximized fields of fire while protecting their logistics vessels. At the center of the formation was a massive command ship, unlike anything in the galactic databases. Nearly 2 kilometers long, its angular hull bristled with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays that painted the surrounding space with targeting data. "Attention, refuge station," came a calm voice over the communication channels. The accent was distinctly human, but the speaker's command of galactic standard was flawless. This is Admiral of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We request permission to establish a defensive perimeter around this facility. Size widened, could it be? The station commander, a nervous trade official, stammered his response. Admiral, that is, Refuge Station acknowledges your presence. Permission granted for defensive positioning, but we must inform you that this system is under Galactic Trade Commission protection. Understood, Station Commander. We have no intention of violating GTC jurisdiction. We are here in response to credible intelligence regarding an imminent attack on refugee populations. Our mission is purely defensive in nature. Doctor appeared at side, having somehow slipped past station security. I thought you might want to see this personally, she said, gesturing toward the main viewer. The human formation was beautiful in its deadly efficiency. The heavy cruisers formed the outer shell, their massive rail guns and missile batteries creating overlapping zones of destruction. Inside that perimeter, fast destroyers and frigates maintained rapid patrol patterns, their sensors sweeping space for any sign of incoming threats. At the formation's heart, carrier vessels disgorged clouds of smaller craft, fighters and interceptors that spread out to form an early warning network spanning the entire system. They've been watching us, realized. For years, they've been learning how we operate, how we think, how we fight. This isn't just a military response, it's a surgical instrument designed specifically for this moment. The humans learned early that in space, mobility and intelligence matter more than raw firepower, Doctor explained. Every ship in that fleet can hit faster than light speeds in under 30 seconds. They can strike anywhere in this sector and be gone before conventional forces can respond. As if to demonstrate her point, a squadron of human destroyers suddenly accelerated to incredible velocities, their drives leaving brilliant trails across space as they took positions at the system's edge. The maneuver was completed in minutes, a deployment that would have taken most fleets hours to achieve. The station's communication systems suddenly crackled with an incoming transmission on a private channel. Refuge Station, this is Admiral requesting to speak with Captain of the vessel Gentle Current. Please respond on a secure frequency. Felt his crew's eyes upon him as he accepted the transmission. The face that appeared on his personal screen was older, marked by years of responsibility and hard decisions, but unmistakably the same human they had rescued from that drifting escape pod 7 years ago. Hello, old friend, said, and despite the Admiral's insignia on his uniform, his smile carried the same warmth remembered. I told you once that my people don't forget their friends. Today I get to prove it. Managed, his voice thick with emotion. When Doctor told me about human operations in this sector, I wondered, but Admiral, they've given you command of all this. Not all of it, replied with characteristic humility. I coordinate intelligence operations for this sector. The fleet is under Admiral Harrison's tactical command, but the strategic planning. Yes, that's been my responsibility. Every ship out there exists because of the data my team died collecting, and because of the kindness you showed a stranger in distress. Before could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The tactical display lit up with new contacts, a massive fleet dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge, or had arrived with over 200 ships, clearly expecting to find only civilian vessels and token defenses. Well, said, his expression hardening, it seems our intelligence was accurate. Captain, I strongly suggest you and any other civilian vessels withdraw to minimum safe distance. What happens next is going to be educational for everyone involved. The fleet approached in their traditional formation, a brutal spearhead designed to overwhelm defensive positions through concentrated firepower. They had used this same tactic to destroy dozens of colonies, and it had never failed them. Or's flagship, the Blood Talon, led the charge with its weapons already charging. But as the fleet closed to engagement range, something unprecedented happened. The human formation simply disappeared. Every ship in the human fleet activated advanced stealth systems simultaneously, vanishing from sensors as if they had never been there. For several minutes, they found themselves facing empty space, their target lock indicators searching frantically for enemies that seemed to have evaporated. What are they doing? Whispered, staring at the tactical display that now showed only contacts. Demonstrating the difference between raiders and soldiers, Doctor replied. The attack, when it came, was like nothing ever recorded in galactic military databases. Human ships materialized out of apparently empty space, appearing directly behind, above, and below the formation. Their first salvo was perfectly coordinated, railgun rounds and guided missiles striking simultaneously across the entire enemy fleet. 12 ships died in that first exchange, their hulls torn apart by weapons designed specifically to exploit the weaknesses intelligence teams had identified. The Raiders' heavy armor, effective against conventional energy weapons, proved useless against kinetic projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. Orr's response was swift and violent. His fleet scattered, attempting to use their superior numbers to overwhelm the humans through sheer firepower. It was exactly what the human commanders had anticipated. As the ships spread out, human strike squadrons emerged from stealth in precisely the right positions to isolate and destroy individual targets. The humans fought with a cold, methodical efficiency that spoke of extensive planning and absolute tactical superiority. They had studied their enemy's every move, anticipated every tactic, and prepared counters for every possible response. They're not just fighting realized as he watched the battle unfold. They're dismantling them. Every engagement is designed to capture ships and personnel, not just destroy them. Indeed, as vessels found themselves disabled by precisely targeted weapons fire, human boarding craft moved in to secure the vessels. This wasn't just a military victory. It was an intelligence operation on a massive scale, designed to capture the entire command structure intact. The battle raged for 3 hours, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. The accustomed to fighting desperate defenders and obsolete security forces found themselves completely outclassed by an enemy that had spent years preparing specifically for this confrontation. When Orr's flagship finally surrendered, surrounded by human vessels and crippled beyond any hope of escape, over 70% of the fleet had been either destroyed or captured. As the human fleet regrouped, Admiral's voice echoed across all communication frequencies, broadcasting on channels that would reach every corner of the sector. To all forces currently operating in this region of space, your leadership is now in our custody. Your base at 442 is currently under attack by our second fleet. Your supply lines have been severed, and your operational capabilities have been eliminated. You have exactly 72 hours to surrender unconditionally or face the same fate as Orr's forces. The message was broadcast in 17 languages, ensuring that every species in the sector would understand what had just occurred. The Confederation, terror of the outer systems for over a decade, had been broken in a single afternoon by a species that most beings had never heard of. But wasn't finished. His next transmission was directed specifically at the refugee populations scattered across dozens of stations and temporary colonies. To all those who have suffered under aggression, the human race stands with you. We remember every world they burned, every life they took, every family they scattered. Today marks the beginning of your return home. Our forces are moving to secure all former territories, and we will provide military protection and reconstruction assistance to any world that requests it. Over the following weeks, the full scope of human operations became clear. The attack on Refuge Station had been just one part of a coordinated offensive that spanned dozens of systems. Human fleets struck simultaneously at every major facility, using intelligence gathered over years of careful observation to achieve complete tactical surprise. The Second Battle of 442 saw human forces retake the very asteroid field where it had been rescued, turning this major base into a humanitarian center for processing prisoners and coordinating relief efforts. The irony was not lost on anyone involved. The place where a simple act of kindness had been performed was now the headquarters for the largest refugee repatriation effort in galactic history. Found himself recruited as a liaison officer, his knowledge of the local trade networks proving invaluable for coordinating relief supplies and transportation. During a brief meeting aboard's flagship, the now Admiral explained the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. 7 years ago, you saved my life when you could have simply passed by, said as they stood in the ship's observation deck, watching the stars. That act of kindness didn't just save one person, it saved my entire mission. The intelligence I gathered about them allowed us to understand the threat they represented, not just to humanity, but to every peaceful species in this region. You built all this because of one rescue? Asked, gesturing toward the massive fleet operations visible through the viewport. We built this because it was necessary, corrected. But you taught us something important that day, that there are good people in this galaxy worth protecting. When we designed our response to the threat, we made sure it would benefit everyone who had shown kindness to strangers, who had helped refugees, who had chosen compassion over profit. As the weeks passed, the human promise proved genuine. Prisoners were treated humanely and eventually repatriated to their home worlds with offers of economic assistance and trade partnerships. Former territories were turned over to local governments, with human forces providing only security and infrastructure support. Most remarkably, the humans refused any territorial concessions or economic compensation for their intervention. When pressed by grateful planetary governments, Admiral's response was always the same. We did what was right because it was right. The only payment we require is your commitment to helping others as you have been helped. The Galactic Trade Commission, initially suspicious of human motives, found themselves dealing with a species that seemed genuinely uninterested in conquest or exploitation. Human trade proposals were fair, their security guarantees reliable, and their technological exchanges benefited all parties equally. They're not building an empire, Doctor observed during one of their regular briefings. They're building something else entirely, a network of mutual assistance and shared defense. It's unlike anything we've seen in galactic politics. For the most remarkable change was in the nature of space travel itself. The trade routes that had been plagued by piracy for decades were now safe, protected by human patrol squadrons that appeared wherever they were needed. The refugee camps that had housed millions of displaced beings were gradually emptying as people returned to rebuilt homes on reclaimed worlds. 6 months after the Battle of Refuge Station, received a personal message from inviting him to attend a ceremony on New Geneva, humanity's regional capital. When he arrived, he discovered that he and his crew were to be honored as founding friends of the Human Alliance, a distinction that came with significant benefits and privileges. "We told you once that we don't forget our friends," said during the ceremony, addressing not just but representatives from dozens of species who had shown kindness to humans over the years. "Today, we established the Mutual Defense and Assistance Compact, a formal alliance between humanity and all those who share our commitment to protecting the innocent." The compact was unlike any treaty in galactic history. Rather than the usual complex arrangements of territory and tribute, it was based on simple principles: mutual aid in times of crisis, shared defense against aggression, and the protection of trade and civilian populations. Member species contributed according to their abilities and received assistance according to their needs. Most importantly, the compact included provisions for what humans called sanctuary obligations, the requirement that all member species provide aid to refugees and assistance to those in distress, regardless of species or political affiliation. It was, in essence, the codification of the simple kindness that had started everything. As stood on the reviewing platform, watching human and allied vessels conducting joint exercises above New Geneva, he reflected on the strange turns that fate could take. A simple decision to answer a distress call had led to this: a fundamental realignment of power in their region of the galaxy, the establishment of the first truly alliance based on mutual aid rather than conquest, and the emergence of humanity as the guardians of a new age of peace and cooperation. "Do you ever regret it?" asked, joining him at the observation rail. "Picking up that escape pod, our lives certainly became more complicated after that." Considered the question as he watched the ships above. Human vessels flying alongside traders, science ships, and dozens of other designs representing species that had found, in humanity, the protectors they had never dared hope for. "Regret showing kindness to a stranger?" he said finally. "Never. The galaxy is a better place because we stopped to help someone in need. Some actions are right regardless of their consequences, but in this case," he gestured toward the fleet above, "the consequences turned out better than we could have imagined." In the years that followed, the Human Alliance would grow to encompass hundreds of systems and dozens of species. The principles established in that first compact would spread throughout the galaxy, creating a new model for cooperation based on mutual aid and shared responsibility. But it all began with a simple choice made by a trader who decided that a distress call from an unknown species was worth answering. In a universe full of darkness and danger, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could reshape the balance between hope and despair. And in the end, That was perhaps humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not their advanced technology or military might, but their unwavering belief that kindness shown to strangers would always find a way to return beyond measure when it was needed most. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, illuminated by the knowledge that somewhere in the vast darkness, there were those who would always answer when someone called for help.